I'd like to call the Finance and Audit meeting to order, May 13th, 5:30 PM, well, 5:36 PM. Can we do a roll call?
Chris Brune?
Here.
Ray Lapinus?
Here.
Connie Machini?
Here.
Carolyn Schofield?
Here.
Lindsay Keisman?
Here. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, I will move on to approval of the minutes for the April 15th, 2025 Finance and Audit meeting. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Motion passes. All right, let's move on to the Treasurer's Report 4A, Finance Report for the period ending 4/30/25, and I'll recognize Melanie.
Okay, so not much to point out on the balance sheet. So we'll just skip that unless anybody has any questions. On the administrative expense budget or expense report, I just want to point out a few things. We had $4,073 in contractual expenses. That was a combination of three things. We paid for the Healthy Community Study, a portion of that for the with the health department. We had Sound Inc. out to do some repairs to the sound system, and we paid our real estate broker for the one office that he has leased for us. Under maintenance agreements, that $5,843 was the HVAC contract for the year. And then under meeting expenses, we had some hotel stays related to an HCCA conference, which is Karen's compliance training every year, and ACMI. So that's all I was going to point out there, unless anybody had any questions about the admin expenses.
I just have a quick question.
Okay.
I'm looking at the legal expenses, and we're at 73%.
Yes.
Does it look like we'll possibly be going over budget because of the extraordinary expenses?
I'm hoping things are going to be settling. It is possible we will go over because, we've had a lot of larger bills in the last few months, and we probably have another large one coming for May. So yeah, it is possible we will go over. But hopefully, like I said, hopefully things have settled down and we won't have as much need to consult with them.
Okay.
But I know we will have, when we do hire the new ED, probably a revised contract. So, there is still stuff on the horizon, but hopefully not quite as much.
Thank you.
All right.
Connie? I'm sorry. One more question. Connie?
I'm going to answer Ray's question. Yes, we will probably go over because we also have to hire a position. We have to have that go through legal, and the past legal things that we had to do with the investigation. I would guess, it's my crystal ball, we will go a little over.
So next report is the revenue and expense report. Nothing major to point out here. Most of our agencies are spending and receiving payments as expected for this point in the year. So the next is the fee for service report. Just wanted to point out the Alexian Brothers Neurodevelopmental Therapist program. We are pulling back $53,940 of their funding because they were unable to fill that position. They had a special condition where the position had to be filled by the end of the first quarter, and they did not do that. So those funds will be coming back into unallocated to be used with their mid-year allocations. And just kind of going down the over-under budget column, you can kind of see who we're going to be expecting some fee-for-service request funds for. Anybody who has a negative amount is most likely going to be reaching out to us for more funding. Then that's about all I had on there. I did want to kind of just touch base on that year funding allocation requests. Right now, pulling back those funds from Alexian Brothers and potentially moving back some funds from Greater Family Health because they had some unfilled positions at the first quarter. It looks like we're going to have about $383,742 in funds available for that mid-year allocation. And our mid-year allocation process ends on the 15th, so 2 more days. Right now, we are sitting at $994,000 in requests with 2 more days to go, with $380,000 available to us. So we're going to have some decisions next month.
I have a question about the Pioneer Center BCBA position. I see that they haven't done anything with that.
Yeah, that's another one where until it gets filled, they're not receiving any funding. They're receiving 6 months of funding starting when they fill the position.
Okay.
So, once we get past the midpoint of the year, if they haven't filled it and we're beyond, less than 6 months, some of that funding would not be, they wouldn't be able to get it.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
So any other questions on the fee-for-service report? All right, then the next report is the opioid settlement fund report. Not much to say here. We still have not seen anything from Mather's Recovery. I believe they were just certified in April to begin treatment. So hopefully we'll see something for May. Are they? Yeah, so we'll start seeing requests from them in May. And then New Directions, we're still waiting for some documents before their one-time capital payment is released. So that's where we're at with that. So any questions? All right, that's the finance reports.
Okay, I'll move on to old business, 5A update on the County Finance Committee presentation. I went with Melanie to our County Board Finance Committee per discussions we've had on just keeping lines of communication open and in hopes to answer questions that they have about what we're doing with the new sales tax, fund balance updates, et cetera. It was a very good discussion. We covered the template that was provided to us by county that you see up there with the updates, and I explained that in details to them, and I'll explain that in more details to you guys today. And went over our fund balance reserve shift down to 3 months, explained some of that. There were some newer board members that had questions just about how we do things, how we move things around, our allocation cycle. So I went through our timelines of the budget process that we do, and then the timelines of our allocations process as well. They had questions about where our interest rates are, if we're planning to do anything with the county treasurer. They had ideas, questions about the programs that we fund that were previously up for discussion, the 22nd Judicial Court and the Police Social Worker Program, of which I reiterated our position that we were looking to collaborate and make sure nothing fell through the cracks there. And there were also there was one surprise question that threw both Melanie and I off our game, but there seems to be some legislation or some legislative efforts at the state level regarding our servicing fees for the sales tax dollars that we receive every month, which are around 30-ish thousand. I don't know if you got a more exact number.
No, actually, I haven't.
30-ish thousand in servicing fees, and apparently there's some legislative actions that they're considering that are things that could benefit us. There was a brief conversation around sales tax conversations across the state. So it seems like our county board has a couple of people who are really interested in sort of the state legislation scene in a way that could work for us or help us. And other things, there's always questions about our administrative budget. So I went a little bit through our administrative budget, explained some of our line items there. And Melanie and I received a lot of thanks and gratitude for just turning it all into English, I think. And Melanie, would you like to add anything as far as anything I've missed?
Yeah, we kind of also talked about the funding process and how the timing of payments, and so that was another area we kind of educated on.
Yeah, are there any questions about that? Connie?
I'm standing only because my leg hurts. Okay.
Yeah,
I just want to say that you both did such a great job.
thank you.
And I really want to thank you and thank you, Melanie, because I got comments from 2 of the board members that listened to you guys.
Okay.
Saying that it was phenomenal. I mean, really, very, very good. And so my comment is just not a question, to say thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you. I will add that typically, apparently, you know, we typically respond or report up to the Public Health Committee. So this was an optional thing. We're not required to do this. This was something that was in conversation with their finance chair, Mike Scala, about just keeping the conversation flowing, making sure people are well informed. And even though our relationship has completely changed since we were on the property tax, there's still just a lot of questions that people have, and they appreciate that. In addition, Peter Austin had said that given that our executive director had just done a presentation at Public Health and that we were doing this presentation at Finance, that usually our executive director and our board president would also do a report to the Committee of the Whole, but he was going to say that we would just skip that this year, given that there had been pretty comprehensive conversations in 2 different committees. And if anybody had any questions, they could, you know, come up to us through our board president or our liaison. So we're off the hook, I guess, for that presentation. So while it's an optional thing, I do think it was very useful, and the conversation wasn't broad. It wasn't the history of the Mental Health Board. It wasn't the history of the Community Mental Health Act. It was very targeted about like how we do things, what our fiscal kind of practices are, where we're at today, how we're forecasting, what we're doing next, where we think things are going to go. And I think that was really well received. If we ever want to do that in the future. All right, I will recognize Carolyn.
And I just wanted to echo Connie's comments, because I think that's exactly what they've been looking for. And I think it shows that we've listened and we've tried to, you know, get them the details that they're looking for and talk on a level that they've wanted to. And I really appreciate the response that, and the coordination that you've done in giving them that information. And I really appreciate it, because I was the one listening to them last time, and now, you know, it's positive feedback, and I think you've done a lot of great work, and I've said that before, and I'll just reiterate it now because I think it's appropriate. So thank you to both of you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions or feedback on that? Okay, I'd like to move forward then to our fund balance utilization projection model, which you guys have seen before. They're in further conversations with Melanie right as we were kind of before this presentation, realizing that we wanted to make some adjustments to this model. And so I wanted to talk through the adjustments that were made. In particular, if you'll look at the interest income row, we actually changed that percentage to a -5. So that was not like that before in the original model that we get or we had received. And the reason for that projection is year over year, we're going to be taking less and less of we're going to have less and less pot of money in there. So even if our interest percentages were the same throughout, you know, this whole period of time, we would just receive less interest income. And once again, that assumes that our interest rates remain stable across this period of time. And in addition, I wanted to update you. We had conversations with the county board treasurer about making investments, and all those things were pulled to the side. And currently, we have our money in a checking account that we can easily access. And as of at least last week, it was at 4.4% for its interest rate. So there has been some comments about reconnecting with the county treasurer to see if there is anything that's more advantageous to consider with that. So I wanted to talk first about this template, and then also to talk about, as a finance committee, is that something that we would like, staff to pursue as a conversation, and then to have another presentation if there is something fiscally responsible we could do with probably a much smaller pool of dollars locked up for a much smaller period of time. But I think it's still a worthwhile conversation to see if there's something better out there, or something more stable that we could count on in case our interest rates reduce. Any discussion about that? All right, Carolyn?
I think it's worthy of a conversation. I mean, I'd like to see, especially because you have a really solid plan in place, and it does leave some money. And I think last time when the treasurer, when she came, there are a lot of options that are available. So I just think she's willing to find one that fits our needs, and we have a clear path here now on what that would be and what that would look like. And I think it's definitely worth a conversation to see if there's something that would fit there that would give us a greater return on the investment and fit within the model that we've created.
Thank you. Did you have a comment, Connie? Did I miss it?
No, I did.
Oh, okay.
Did on before.
Oh, okay, sorry. Anybody else, any additional feedback? Okay. Christina?
Yeah, I just want to recognize, I think this is improved in its, reasonable, I think it's a more reasonable forecasting model than we had previously. I appreciate you taking into account the changes in the overall level of fund balance and the impact of that on interest income, and also the fact that you moved administrative non-personnel into the positive realm, because I do foresee the possibility that those costs could escalate, particularly given conversations we just had in buildings and grounds about the need for, ongoing building improvements that we foresee into the future.
Yes, and I want to recognize that 1%, some of the things that fall into that is even like our rental income and things. So, those are decisions that we have to make year over year if we want this model to be accurate. And if anything else changes, there's only a couple of these rows that we actually have control over, because some of them we don't have control over. We don't have the exact control over the sales tax percentage. We don't have, too much control over the interest income. So, year over year, or really even at regular intervals in finance, I think we should be looking at this to update it with the reality of the data that we have. So, yeah. Carolyn?
And I just wanted to add one thing, too, along those same lines. I do think, this is the reality as of today. And I've always said it, that admin percentage of total kind of just tugs at me a lot, because, I just think we still need to make it a goal as opportunities arise to try to reduce that percentage, because then that could actually increase that client services line. And it would not remain flat for all those. We could actually start increasing that slightly. So I just, this is great, it's a snapshot as of today, but any time that there may be an opportunity, like you said, reevaluating either the admin non-personnel issues, or, if changes in admin arise, we can see how maybe we can rethink things along the way. So just being conscious of that any percentage we can drop in that admin percent total actually can increase that client services. So hoping that that's a goal as well.
I do want to point out in this new forecasting model, In the yellow area, you will see that kind of the lowest we get for our reserve dollars are that 3.56 in 2030, 2031. That if this were the perfect model, it would be in 2032 that we're going to kind of finally catch up with sales tax. So it's a hot minute away. None of this accounts for cost of living increases for, our funded agencies and their programs either. So I did make it pretty clear in that county finance, meeting that, this model isn't going to look at like wild sweeping increases in services. And that while we'll do our best to, be great stewards of the dollars and try to, fit the needs, there will, not be a large increase. But we will see. As to Carolyn's point, every year there's new opportunities, or as I heard, grants that could solve some of our building, needs that would go right back to client services. So, yeah. Or maybe we'll get a grant from our grant writer. So, yeah. Okay. Is there any further discussion on that before we move on? Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to move on. You were a little bit forecasting there, Carolyn. I asked for staff to do a little breakdown. There's been a lot of conversations about the percentage of administrative that we have in our budget. And it's a little murky because we do have within our admin some roles that exist here in the Mental Health Board that are more direct service to our community. So I did ask Melanie to kind of pull out a couple of things. So I'm going to move the mic over to Melanie. She can walk us through each one of these.
Okay, so at the top here, you can kind of see the $2 million in admin budget on the actual budget itself, where we're looking at a 15.91% admin percentage. But if you kind of break it down a little bit more, so for instance, our personnel expenses, it's the 1.1 million, but of that we have two positions that are pretty much 100% client service. It's our training coordinator and our training assistant, and they basically are doing the CEU programming. They're working on the network marketing. So those positions, even though they're considered, we don't break them out from our admin, they really aren't direct admin services. They are more client services. So if you pull that out, that reduces the actual admin personnel to 961,000. But even with that, you have your full compliance team. While our compliance team is out there educating the providers and training them. So it's kind of a misname to call us all administrative, because we're not truly just administrative. We're informing them of proper procedures they should be following. We're making sure they're complying with, the grant requirements. We're updating them on different regulations and so forth. So, but those two positions we can specifically identify as say, these are related to network and client services. Without those positions, we wouldn't be able to provide the CEU training and, help the network stay licensed. Then the next category I kind of looked at was the other admin expenses. And, the main thing I can pull out of there is the bathroom remodel. That capital project, even though it's considered admin in nature, that's your one-time thing. It's not going to be part of your regular admin. So if you look at that, our other non-personnel and non-building expenses would be $311,000. Next, we have our county IT and FM IGAs. Just to kind of talk about those, we had, mentioned looking into more IGAs, and, it's still personnel expenses, it's still admin expenses, even if we shift the cost to county instead of, having our own personnel. And, as a team, Bridget, Karen, and I looked to kind of what functions we're doing that we could do an IJ with county other than the IT and FM, and we really couldn't think of anything, because, our staff is kind of specialized in what they do, and I'm not sure what we'd be able to cross-train or, do with an IGA for county staff. So next we look at our building. yes, we have $205,000 in building expenses, but those are actually offset by $156,000 in rental income. So the cost to us, after we look at that, is really, under $50,000 for us to operate this building for our staff, once you back out that rental income. So now if you look at your adjusted in this matter, you're at $1.4 million, which is 11.707%. You can put back in the, capital project, and you're at 13%. So that's kind of what we looked at, and how, we were trying to come up with a more reasonable explanation of our administrative percentage. So any questions on that? It's kind of.
Carolyn?
Thank you, and I do really appreciate that, because I've done that too with the buildings, and I kind of has gotten to the question of too, of at what point, keeping an eye on that
Yeah.
number, and if it's increasing that overhead, or, I think that's finding the sweet spot in the building too, because that, one capital project for this year significantly increased. We can't
Exactly.
afford to be doing it year after year
Right.
after year. So I think just keeping an eye on that, because it's a significant difference. So I appreciate that. One of the questions I was going to have, and it kind of goes into this because it's brought up on this one, is with the training coordinator, and then you have like the training assistant with increasing the hours, and who sets like the training that they do? Like, I know this year we had added like a separate training, to fall in line with a request. We kind of put that additional training, I think, into our admin, didn't we? Like, there was one, and they had a request for training, and didn't we put it like into our training expense? I forget who it was, but it was a specific training. Connie, do you remember who I'm talking about?
Well, we have a staff training budget. Are you talking about?
No, there was like a specific request, and I remember we put it in training, because we're like, oh, we could do that training for this year, and it was a provider specifically asked for a certain training, and instead of giving it under there, we put it into our training.
No, if we'd have paid for a training for a provider, it would still come out of that network training budget.
Well, so that's what I'm curious about. So like, because I am a huge advocate of training. I think it goes
Right.
a long way. And I think, to our providers, it goes a long way. So trying to figure out, so the difference between like what our training coordinator and assistant are doing versus filling the needs of maybe the providers or within networks of providers,
Right. So-
what they might need.
So every year, our training coordinator sends out a survey to the providers, seeing, what are you looking for, and that helps her develop her plan. She also evaluates what is required for certain licenses. There's certain types of training they have to have. So she gets that information, what's required to keep their certification. There's, ethics or, different hot topics that, people need to be trained on. So that's how she kind of develops the plan. So it's that input from the agencies, what they're looking for, and also what legally, they're required to have to maintain their licensure. So, that's how she's evaluating what type of programming to offer. So they do have input in that, and, she's trying to make sure that we're offering everything categorically that, they need to maintain their CEUs or their licensure, so offering those to them.
Okay, so it does rotate annually. And then are they just going to the network, or are we going to the community too, and maybe looking at like
The community.
It goes to the community as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I just think that there's maybe like pockets of ones that maybe could be added in there.
I believe it goes
and-
to anybody who receives like the hot sheet is on that, receives that survey.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if we go beyond who's on the hot sheet, so anybody who, even, people that aren't agency provider, funded by us are also receiving that information and having input and say, and so it's community-wide.
And,
Yeah.
and can we, like, do we see that, or do we just have to go? I know the hot sheet, like, we can see what trainings are offered, but like, I'd be curious, because I think this is great. I'm with you. I don't think this is like an admin expense. I think this is like a service. I mean, I think this is, it's a community service, it's not provider-specific. So I actually think kind of even moving forward, this is an area that could actually increase and have a profound greater
Yeah,
effect,
right.
an exponential
Yeah, I mean,
effect, kind
Chris
of
and I
like the
were
grant
just
writer.
talking the other day about potentially, doing a quarterly community training. We heard a lot at the town hall about the community, not necessarily the professionals, wanting more information on topics and, so, I mean, that might be a further way we can, expand and provide knowledge, so.
I just think maybe during if the allocation process too, it might be a good idea to have a handle on those trainings or how that process is or the feedback. I don't know when you get that feedback. And because I'd be willing to take a look and increase training and see
Right.
if there's a fit for, again, it kind of goes with this collaboration and costs.
Chris is unreal when she works with these places. She had this speaker that wanted to charge $7,000. And she said to him, well, we don't charge for our trainings and we're trying to help out the community. And she got him down to $300.
Yeah,
I mean,
see,
she's
that's-
just she's really good. She has all these contacts and she reaches out to new people and, explores. And so she makes really good, really stretches her budget.
Yeah, and I think,
yeah.
in kind of looking at it in the allocation and seeing if we can kind of capture the needs of maybe if some are putting in for certain, just because I know there was one last year, I can't think of who it was, but I know there was a training.
Yeah, we try to
component last year
accommodate
where we're
when
like,
we
we can do
can,
that
yeah.
training. So, but if there's something we can do that helps one and can help, a lot more, I think it's a worthy investment. So I just wanted to bring that up as we're talking about it. I'd personally like to maybe get a better understanding. So I appreciate that it is an annual reevaluation process, but, I'm willing to even look at it further, but just
Yeah.
kind of need to understand how that is.
Yeah, and like I said, it's not just what the agencies want. She actually looks, for everyone we have, the license to certify, she evaluates what that licensure requires and tries to meet all the needs, so
Perfect, thanks.
really good.
Okay. Connie?
I just want to say in training too, if you know somebody who does good training, calling her up, I've done this many times, saying, why don't you get a hold of, making this up, John Brown, because he does this for IODAPCA or does this train, and she looks into all that. And after any training, you have a survey you have to do before you even get your little certificate, and you have to sign in, and there's this big survey, that she sends out to everybody. I'm amazed at all the different topics that she puts on her survey. I don't know, when does that go out? I know it goes out once a year at least.
Yeah. I
It
wanna
went on in
say
the last couple
fall.
months, I thought,
Anyway,
like
I've
the last
given
6
her
months.
If we give her something that we think we want, she will look into it as long as, I remember one of them that I wanted was $20,000, but I had no idea. It's like, no way, we can't do that. But, if you have somebody that you think would do good training and it would help, then let's do it. Yeah.
The only thought I had was for last year, I know we ended up moving Best Communities to an independent contract because they were going to be doing trainings, and I think their original application was not for that, so I'm not sure if that's what you were referencing.
Who did you move?
I think staff actually made the recommendation to the board, though, already, as it came in as a request for training for peer recovery support specialists.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we moved them to an independent contract agreement because it would actually be more affordable than them paying for locations and all the support that we already have inherently built in here. So, yeah. Are there, kind of going back to this document, the different percentages, are there any additional questions or clarifications that anybody would like about this? No? Okay, all right, seeing none, I will move on to 5D, the recommendation for the updated FY26 draft budget. I do know that, I think everybody was here, that the Building and Grounds Committee, I believe, recommended $175,000 to be the line item for the capital bathroom project, which currently in this draft budget, it is at 300.
Yes.
So we would need to make that amendment to this draft budget. But is there any, beyond that, is there any additional conversation about the FY26 draft budget? Otherwise, we do need to make a recommendation to the full board. So can I get a motion for the FY26 draft budget with the changes from Building and Grounds?
I make a motion to approve the FY26 budget with the updated for 175 for capital projects for the bathroom.
Okay, and second?
Second.
Okay, and any discussion? Okay, Carolyn?
So two things, because I'm fine with like moving this, draft, as long as we're kind of flexible a little bit on some areas. And two in particular, one being, I'm looking where the grant writer is. Did we leave it at 50,000?
Yes.
Okay. So I was curious on that, like how that's going, because again, I mean, that's another area that I think the return on investment is really significant. So I also would be willing to take a look at that one and, see if there was a need for more and what that might look like, or if there's, I mean, I don't know the environment right now in grants. I mean, I know the state's putting out a few here and there, not in a specific area, but, I haven't seen huge changes, but I know there's been a lot of talk, so I don't know if the grant writer, what they're seeing at the federal level, but, do we anticipate that we could be doing more with that? And how that might look. So I guess I would look to staff to see if we've given any thought, if really that's an area that should,
increase.
yeah.
No, but we can have that discussion.
We are planning on having monthly or bi-monthly meetings with John, who is the grant writer, and we can ask that question candidly to see, and I can have the discussion with him next week. Mel will be out, but we can have the discussion with him next week to see what the anticipation is, if there's going to be greater needs or any.
How much did he bring in last year? Brought in quite a bit.
Yeah, but that was that huge AOT grant from 22nd.
Right.
I don't know how many opportunities like that he has. I know there's quite a few smaller ones in the works, a couple 100,000 combined with a bunch of the smaller agencies. We really have, most of them are in process right now, so we really don't have, a big return yet this year, but there's a lot in the works that could potentially.
How does our contract with him work? Like, is it so many hours a month, or is it, something where he runs out of time mid-year? If we have the dollars, we could decide to give him more? Like, I don't.
That 50,000 is divided over 12 months, and he puts in the time and works with the agencies. It hasn't been a point where he said, nope, you're exceeding what you're paying me. So,
He finds the
Yeah.
grants, and then the grants are dispersed amongst the agencies that would work, unless they have a grant writer of their own. And I have to say again, I think the three of us can all speak to it. He is phenomenal. I mean, he has just been.
He isn't an hour for hour person. It's divided by 12 months, and he has to bring in grants. I mean, I talked to him, I interviewed him with Leo. Guy is like, Bridget said, he's phenomenal.
It's really impressive.
He really researches it, and he brings in.
right, he has deliverables, and he's supposed to be doing 4 to 8 grants for us a month,
Right.
working on them, so.
He's supposed to apply for 4 grants at least a month.
Working with this in previous jobs, when you submit grants, there's always X amount that you need, or, oh, you've missed this, this, and this. When we sat in that meeting, we were missing nothing, and they were just so impressed by the grant that was submitted. It was just, and he's just so well put together, and so he's really great. So yeah, I agree with Carolyn. Like, the return on investment on that is amazing. So
Amazing.
yeah.
And then the second one I had was, we were continuing to have conversations about transportation. And if you look at the utilization in the transportation,
Yeah, Kaizen is low this year.
yeah, it's really low this
Yeah.
year. And even last year, we adjusted it, and the actuals came in a lot lower than we had. I mean, if you look at the years, like 103, 195, 122, 78, 18,000 so far this year, but we're back up at 90,000.
You know, and that's a number we can definitely reduce and move to the funding pool. That's just kind of like a starting point for conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, we've kind of been enforcing more on what the providers are doing, because we had a lot of them where, you know, their first thing was to just go to Kaizen rather than try to work with PACE, or they just went with the easy route. So we're not seeing as much use because of that.
Which is exactly how it should be. I mean, there are other options out there, and that's why I think, you know, we should continue those conversations too with, you know, county transportation, with MC Connect, MC Ride, like with their department on, you know, what they're already paying for and what we're already paying for and what everybody else in the community is already paying for, you know, so we're not doubly paying for it. And then that can be used either towards the grant writer or towards services or towards training. I mean,
Right.
those are small amounts of money, you know, maybe in the scheme of the budget, but can make a significant difference. Like $20,000 to go towards, you know, more grant writing or more training is pretty impactful. So I guess I would like to maybe see that number tweaked a little bit too, so that we could utilize it in another area, be it, you know, training, grant writing services, whatever.
So last year, we spent 78,000 in '24. This year, I'm projecting we're going to spend about 55,000. So I mean, we could definitely drop that down to, say, 60 for next year, and that 30 would go, like I said, back up to that pool for allocation. We could also leave it where it's at and do mid-year evaluation and remove it, because it's basically just a project. It's just a simple, I changed a project budget, so it's not anything that needs to go to county for change or anything. It's just something we can say, hey, we're looking at this utilization, it's way down, let's move it to mid-year. So, I mean, it's all what, you know, you guys want to go with. If you want to just start with 60,000 and say, well, that's just where we're going to leave it at, or,
I would prefer to change it just because I think we need to change the mindset. I think we need to, you know, understand the other services that are offered if people are, and I think we've had great training on, you know,
Right.
Scott's come in and has talked to Network Council, and so I think, you know, continuing down that path of we need to be the
Explore other
last
options.
option. So I just think it would change the mindset and it would reinforce that mindset change, but that's me personally because it's kind of been my thing, so that's all. Thank you.
I like the idea of making changes. I don't want us to always say we'll catch it in the mid-year, because I think year over year, like if we can give more in the beginning, and mid-year is really to capture, you know, the stuff we hopefully couldn't predict, right? So, you know, to me, I'd love us to set a budget that reflects, you know, the prior year or something very close to the prior year. So your suggestion of 60,000 makes quite a bit of sense to me. It's your projection. They used more last year, and the reality is if it runs out, it runs out, and then we see where the gaps are, if they're there. Connie?
I agree with Carolyn, but I really think, now maybe this is far off, but I think that if we set up a time, maybe at Pioneer, at Warp Core, to apply for the reduced fare card, half of the people that I talk to go, what? Where do I get that? They can ride for $4 a ride. We could be taken out of a lot, we can reduce our budget. They don't know where to go. I mean, if I want a reduced fare card, I have to go to the township. Do you think somebody who has a mental illness knows to go to the township? Maybe we have some kind of coordination, I mean, this is just my thought, with whoever, and have it at Pioneer, have it at Willow Creek on their Fridays that they get together and have everybody, have it at Warp Core. People can get that reduced fare card, but they don't know how. I've got 5 people that are sitting in Marengo right now that I've talked to who have a mental illness, who don't know how to get the reduced fare card. And unless you know how to, I would think that maybe we could work together with, I don't know, the county, whatever. That would save us so much money if they had that card. They can go for $4 a ride instead of us paying Kaizen a fortune for the rides. I mean, but they don't know where to go for it. And I think if we could coordinate, that's just my feeling, if we could coordinate that a bit.
Well, it would be a benefit for them, for their life.
Please turn your microphone
It would
on.
be a benefit, go ahead.
It's okay. All right, Linda?
Sorry. It would also be a benefit for them since they could use that for other places. So it would be an improvement to their life choices because they could use it to go to the grocery store or to some other appointment, so.
They could use it on the RTA, to go on a train, they could use it for everything. I mean, that reduced fare when the county got into that with $4 a ride is unbelievable, but if you ask many of them, they don't even know where to go for it. Even the seniors don't know where to go for it. I think we need to have places that we're offering them to sign up. And I tell you, I have a reduced fare card myself. It's one sheet of paper to fill out. You help them fill it out, they send it in, and they get a card like a license. I mean, that's what we need to do to help people get around.
I just want to bring this conversation back to budgeting around transportation. No, I mean, I think it's, it's a strategic initiatives conversation about, better utilization of county programs. And if, lack of awareness is the barrier, then, what can we do with that? But as far as dollars and Kaizen.
Yes, I know.
I'd like to see, if there is other input from board members around reducing it to, I threw out that number 60 because that's what Melanie said. Does anybody have further discussion on making a different suggestion? Okay, seeing none, then I think we could make the suggestion that we move Kaizen's FY26 budget down to 60,000 as one of the talking points. And then going back to the conversations that started around the grant writer, at least my thoughts on that is I'd really love for our grant writer to tell us that he's at capacity and that there's more opportunity that we're missing. Before saying that we're going to increase that budget. And I do think that we could have sort of a philosophy of an open door conversation if he came to us and said, hey, I'm working a lot of hours for this $50,000, even within that same year, I don't think we're going to, I would assume we have the relationship with him where he would have that conversation with us. And perhaps we could make an urgent decision to increase, that year. But, my stance on it is, while I do want us to get more with that grant writer, dollars, I'm a little leery of saying, can we do more if we pay more? Because the answer is usually yes for most people when you come to them with a question like that. And given some of the landscape, that seems a little, to me, unclear, and maybe that grants will be on a reduction. I'm concerned that, four grant applications a month, that's a lot. We got a couple from that pace. So it sort of leads me to believe that we don't need more personally. I'd rather wait and make that decision with his feedback over the next year, with kind of like proof in the pudding kind of concept of, hey, if you need to work more and we see more, then give more, is how I feel about it. I'd like to see that stay at the $50,000. You're really far down there, Chris.
Yeah, sure. I am favorable toward allocating more toward grant writing if that's possible within our budget, partly because of what you're talking about, because federal grant expenditures will be reduced. It's probably going to, we're going to have to work a little harder for what we're going to get. We're going to be looking at individual donors, bequest corporations and foundations as sources of funding. And and the state maybe, but it's a different kind of context. But I do think that, we're getting a lot more than we're paying for here. out of these efforts. And it does take a lot of applications to get, the number that we've, of successful
Yeah.
applications that we've experienced. So, and I just, as somebody who's done federal grant review, having a professional grant writer is an incredible boon. It's just a world of difference in the quality of the application. So I think that's great. Also favorable toward cutting where we can. Would love to see us print less stuff on paper. I think we can move away from binders that have we have all the information electronically available to us. I don't think we need to print things, and when we do, I think we can go down to NAMI page like they were talking about in our town hall.
Carolyn?
And I just wanted to follow up because I brought up the grant writer. I agree with you and thanks for the feedback that, we haven't really maxed out. And I just don't want to see us turning away opportunities and telling people we can't do it. So kind of in between the two of like, let's leave it at that. But if people are saying, I really wanted to submit this, but then they're saying we can't, I don't want to, I think that that's an opportunity to come back to the board as well. So I'd be open to that in the future. But I'm good with it where it's at now, so thanks.
Christina, I have a question since you seem to bring some experience to this. Do you, if you were to propose a different amount of money to be dedicated to this, and I'm just making some assumptions, if we're getting 4 a month for $50,000, if we move it to $75,000, do we get 6 a month? I'm not sure that that's true, but do you have any experience to bring to the table for like the number of grants that we would put in that would potentially increase?
Yeah, part of the challenge is that the amount of effort that goes into an individual application varies wildly by what type of grant it is, what the potential source of funding is. So like a federal grant is like 100 pages long plus the assurances. But, a grant to a community foundation could be a letter.
Right.
So it's really hard to say like how many can I get? And it's also the case that you could put X amount of hours into a $10,000 grant and put that same amount of hours into a $100,000 grant. So, there's so much variability, and I would really look to a conversation with the grant writer about what are our opportunities to scale up here. And, maybe if they're saying, well, there isn't anything else to apply for, okay, then we don't do that. But if they're saying, yes, there is, then we can say, can you give us a prospectus? What is it going to cost us to apply, to offer our, our network council members more opportunities to apply for external funding? Because that's, given our constrained financial circumstances, that's only going to bring in outside dollars. That's going to allow us to deliver more service without, kind of having to go through the mental health board.
I guess I have another question going back to, and Melanie, I'll give this to you. If we were to budget that $50,000 and, have the conversation with him that if there's more and you have the time and capacity, can you give us more? Halfway through the year, if we wanted to, and I know this might be a line item jump, but we're going to end up with some amount of mid-year allocations, and this isn't a ton, this isn't $100,000 of extra money. I assume that we might be able to make that decision halfway through the year or a quarter into the year if his feedback is, yes, there's more, I have more hours to give, and I'm submitting 10, that we could adjust it mid-year to make sure we afford it?
Yeah.
If the board believes that that's a good use of? Okay.
You also have to realize we have a limited number of agencies that are even working with our grant writer. A lot of the bigger ones have their own grant writer that they're working with. So they're the ones that are probably going to be going for those bigger dollar ones, whereas your smaller, more prevention-based agencies aren't necessarily going out for as many, and that's where the help is needed more. So there, there's also a limit as to, yeah, they might be out there, but who's within our network going to apply for them, what their bandwidth is.
Okay.
And I'll say this as delicately as possible, is we have some agencies that are very responsive and work, and there's not a lot of time that's put into it. Questions are put out and the information's back, and some of the agencies he's putting a lot more time in. So there's that balance as well. So
Okay. Connie?
I was the one last year that really pushed to get a grant writer because there's so much money out there. And he sits in Washington, and I mean, maybe with Trump, there's not going to be a lot, I mean, I'm just saying a lot more grants. But he has $50,000. He has a contract. It's divided by 12 months. He has to tell us each month how many grants he's applied for, 10, 15, 24, whatever he's applied for. And every agency has the right to let us know, hey, I found this grant over here. I remember after we voted for hiring a grant, 2 executive directors came up to me from agencies going, oh, this is great, because we can't afford grant writers. And so at Network Council, if they have somebody, I really think it's a wise, and he has a contract, and we interviewed 2 or 3 grant writers before we hired this gentleman, and I don't know what his name is, but
John.
John. In fact, he was out here.
Yep.
He came out here to meet all of us. I think it's a wise spend of money, $50,000. He's brought in to the courts, 1.2 million of a grant already. So it's not writing grants for us, it's writing grants for agencies and providers. And he's already done that, and he now has, Durbin's grant and whatever. I think he knows it. He's out there in Washington, he's looking. I personally, this is my own opinion, I think we're going to see less and less grants, except maybe where legislators have so much to give out, how they give out so much, like Durbin's giving out so much. I don't think we're going to see a lot. Our president has eliminated a lot of Department of Education where there was a lot of grants there. There's been an elimination of some. So he's got to research it, and he's got to come through. And I believe his grant or his contract is year by year, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, at any time, I don't know when his year ends, if he's not providing or doing, we can say, I'm sorry, we'll part ways, John. But I think it took a while to bring him up to speed to get to know what we are, what we do, what our agencies do. And every agency has the right to send to us saying, I want this grant, apply for it. So I personally think it's a wise choice to have the grant writer.
I guess in summary, I think everybody's in agreement that the grant writer is a wise choice. I think up for discussion is whether or not we want to add dollars to it and, what flexibilities we have if that decision needs to be made, during our FY26 budget, or if there's flexibility and information that we need, maybe some further input from our grant writer would also help make that decision. Is that something, a conversation staff feels like they can have and bring to us before our board meeting where we do the final vote on this? Okay.
I think his contract, though, is, I want to say September or something. I'm just letting you know that.
It goes through the end of the year, November.
What is it?
It goes through November.
November, it goes to November, okay.
Okay. So then we'll have staff hopefully add some additional input, but otherwise, so far, I've heard the transportation for Kaizen being adjusted to 60,000 as another item that this committee is in agreement with. Yes, okay. Is there any further discussion about the FY26 budget? Okay. We did have a motion and a second as far as a recommendation. Does anyone want to make adjustments to that? Otherwise, we have to put it up for a vote, or we could leave it be. I think it was,
I was going to say, do they want to do a friendly amendment on that? I mean,
Yeah.
Did you move?
I
I made the motion, Ray.
Ray seconded, so we would need,
Just add that as a friendly amendment, or do you want me to make an amendment?
I-
If you just add it as a friendly amendment to include the Kaizen
Oh,
adjustment,
yeah,
she
yeah, as
can
an
raise,
amendment.
okay with it, then we'll just leave it as that motion.
great. so we have a friendly amendment to move Kaizen to 60,000, and then currently the budget will stay the same for the grant writer, and we'll have further discussion at the full board meeting? Okay, if that's the case, then we do need to make a vote.
And they had already said.
Oh, yeah. More people in the room. Okay, we do have 5 yeses. Is that, we're missing somebody, right? Oh, okay. Hello. All right, motion carries then. All right. Great. Any new business for discussion? No? Okay, seeing none, then I need a motion to adjourn. So moved. Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, we are adjourned.